Alrighty. Hey, welcome. Thanks, Shawn, for joining. Great to see you. Long time no see, but good to see you.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we know each other for a while, but for the people who don't know you, please briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, happy to. Hello, everyone. My name is Shawn Bass. I'm the CTO of End User Computing at VMware.
Hey, Shawn, how would your best friends or your parents describe what you do?
Oh, that's a great question. I've got a number of family members that just say he does computer stuff, and then they just kind of leave it at that. But I think one of the funny things is when I always get a chance to hear my wife describe what I do to different people, it's always funny because she makes these explanations up, and I look at her and I'm like, that's not at all what I do. And she's like, well, tell me again what you do. And so I explain it to her, and then the next time I hear her describe it to a relative, it's again a different variation of that, and I'm like, yeah, that's still not what I do. So it's always an interesting process.
Nice. Hey, you're active in IT. You know a couple of my IT horror stories or IT shit what happened stories. Will not bother the audience with that right now, but what is your IT horror story?
Yeah, so I've actually had a number of them, but one of them that was not as bad as it could have been was pretty early in my consulting career. Me and my business co-founder, we ran a small IT consulting practice, and we were going out to some small services shop. I can't recall if it was an accounting office or a legal office or what it was. And we were there to do some computer work on, back in the day, this is just to give the context on how long ago this was, their NetWare server, their NetWare 312 server. And we had to do some work on the endpoint PCs as well. And my business partner, Alan, was really good about having like these crazy batch files and sequences and stuff on these disks that he'd carry around with them. So I asked him for one of his disks because I needed a tool off, some executable off one of the floppies. So he hands it to me and I put it in this computer. And on the floppy, there's a whole bunch of executables and there's some batch files. And I'm like, what is this batch file? And I click on it, and little did I know that this computer had that assistive feature for mouse usage. I think it's called like click lock or something like that, where a single click mimics a double click. So I clicked on this batch file with the intention of right clicking and doing edit or review or whatever, but instead it started running. And all I remember was about 1/10 of a second watching all this stuff scroll past the screen in like a DOS box. And all I remember seeing was like the hard disk partitioning command and the formatting command. And I was like, oh my God, it's like trying to run against this computer and format the hard drive while I'm on the computer.
Too late.
And luckily, this is one of those only circumstances where you're like, oh, antivirus actually did something to help you. The antivirus boot sector protection kicked in and stopped the partitioning and formatting command because it was trying to overwrite the boot sector. Whoa. But I had that moment where I was like, oh my God, I just screwed up this person's computer, and antivirus saved the day. Go figure.
Wow, great story. Hey, so working from home, mental health, to stay healthy, like from a mental perspective, stay motivated, work from home, small office. If you're fortunate to have a small office working from home, how do you keep yourself motivated and find a decent, and you can define decent, right? But decent work-life balance?
Yeah. So I guess I'll comment on my own particular struggles. I think what's been difficult for me is it's not so much the impact on me, myself, it's the impact on the rest of my family. I mean, I don't think I recognized how beneficial it was for me to be out at the office, to not be disturbing the life of my family members. It's like, oh, dad's up on a call, he's on a video call, he's on a conference call, try to keep quiet, don't make a lot of noise. And I've got a family of 4 and a dog, and it's like, how can they possibly not make any noise so it doesn't interfere with my calls? And granted, I think everyone's in the understanding with this current situation we've been in that, there are going to be noises in the background, there's going to be babies crying, there's going to be dogs barking. That's just a way of life right now. But I didn't realize the impact that me being here has on all of them. And that's, I think, been the hardest part of this whole process. And the other thing I would say is I didn't realize how important having that physical disconnect of leaving the office, like leaving your office, getting in the car, driving home, that ability to sort of decompress and separate work from home life was a huge benefit. And I've actually worked from home for quite some time, but I've also worked in an office. And I think that separation of leaving the office and going home and having that disconnect is hugely valuable. And we obviously don't have that now. I'd say one of the hardest parts is not having that, actual demarcation of ending your workday and then on to family life. And that's been particularly challenging for me because I'm in Chicago right now, which is a central time zone, which is 2 hours ahead of California. So very often I'll have people in California that are scheduling meetings at 4 or 5 p.m. their time, which of course is 6 to 7 p.m. my time. And so that obviously creates a lot of challenges. Now I'm preaching to the choir here, given that, you operate for a Bay Area company that you are many, many hours ahead of their time zone. But I think it's almost better in some ways when you have a larger separation because people are more conscious of it. When you have a 2-hour separation, everyone's like, oh, they're in the US. It's no big deal. We'll just schedule this at whatever time. That's the biggest challenge, I'd say.
Yeah. Hey, working for VMware and EUC, well, I think it's great actually to see that what you and team has accomplished, like with joining VMware some years ago, and where VMware is right now with EUC. It's good for everyone in the markets to have like strong, call it, vendors in this space, and with a full stack and then a larger EUC story. That full stack and larger story is on one side great, but on the other side can also be very complex. So the question more like what is and what's the biggest threat, or maybe who is the biggest threat in that call it like larger VMware EUC story?
Yeah, I would say it's a hard thing to articulate because I think end user computing and IT in general is a very fluid industry. There's a lot of things that wax and wane in popularity. I mean, there was a time, keep in mind that, Windows and Intel was the dominant force in computing, and everyone thought there is nothing that is ever going to change this. And today you see things like, Apple producing their own ARM chips for new MacBooks going forward. You see things like Microsoft with their Surface devices embracing ARM. And that whole kind of notion of the Wintel monopoly that dominated IT for a long time is changing rapidly. I would say the biggest thing that, I see as being disruptive to the IT industry in general is still by large, cloud computing. But I don't think we've seen the biggest disruption yet in cloud computing, because I think the biggest disruption is going to come when a significant number of assets have been positioned on cloud, and then the security threat starts to move from the data center centric or premises centric attacks to cloud centric attacks. And I think everyone's become pretty comfortable with cloud because of the rate of change and innovation that happens there. But I think the security threats that are going to plague cloud computing in the future have only just begun. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest threat long term, is how the industry manages security in an ever-changing multi-tenant co-located world like that. It's going to be a big challenge going forward.
Is it like in general, or like more VMware, more risk you see from a VMware perspective?
Yeah, I don't think it's a specific threat levied against VMware. I think it's a threat levied against the entire cloud computing industry. I think, we've become comfortable in thinking that cloud computing is more secure than on-premises computing, when really whether something's in the cloud or on-prem doesn't necessarily make it any more or less secure. I think what things being in the cloud does oftentimes is it changes the operating model, which in some cases leads to better security because things are more rapidly done. But I think we're going to see a new set of attacks, and this has already happened over the last couple of years, of computer timing-based attacks that allow information leakage from one tenant to another in a cloud computing platform. I think you're going to see a lot more of that as time goes on. So it's going to be an interesting space to watch in the coming years.
Yeah. Hey, a final sort of task, not really a question, but I will mention some for you random words I prepared. So for me, they're not random, but some words. And I'm just curious, like your first response to these words. Here they come. Netherlands.
Orange.
Favorite drink.
Coffee.
Car.
I guess I'd say Tesla, even though I don't own one.
VMware.
Virtualization, obviously.
2020.
First word that comes to mind. Painful.
Sheephead.
Interesting.
EUC.
EUC. Satisfaction, I guess. I love what I do. I love when you're confused.
Final one, holiday.
Holiday. God, I wish I could have one right now.
Good. Thanks, Shawn. Thanks. Nice talking, and thanks for all the insights and the fun as well. Thanks.
Always a pleasure, Ruben. Great to see you again.
Likewise.
Take care.